One of the things that has really been bothering me are the events in Iran and all the wars and this and that. It's crazy. It's made me kind of stand back and make it very difficult for me to do these videos as I'm reacting to it and thinking about it. Now, foreign policy is one of my major interests since I grew up with it. So it's always been there. I studied, quite a bit about it. But I don't want to talk about war. I don't want to talk about politics, not because it's not interesting. And maybe I will do some political videos, but I want people to understand the metaphysical aspect of these external events. They represent internal issues, not only of the society we live in, but each of us individually. So we live, if you're in the United States or Europe, particularly, Japan, South Korea, Australia, etc. All these countries are part of a empire. Now, the empire and empires are all unique, but the main thing is that there's a central power that has ultimate authority over these various countries. So, the United States, or the Washington regime, I call it, has power over all these countries. Now, they don't have literally any, they can't execute someone in Japan or something like that, although they might kill them with, a CIA hit squad or something. And they do, by the way. This has been done, but generally Washington tries not to overdo their authority. One of the big differences is that particularly since Trump was first elected, everything started to shake. The sort of ongoing business as usual political thing that was happening in Washington was disrupted. And many things happened between 2016 and 2020. And then there was the COVID, uh, whatever you want to call it, debacle, it would be my term, that caused all kinds of other problems because it was soon pretty clear that the whole thing was kind of fraudulent. There was an aspect of fraud to it. And I think it was more than just fraud. I believe a bioweapon was exposed, and that the fact that the United States in particular had been pursuing bioweapons since pretty much the end of World War II. It was taking over the Nazi projects and bringing them forward in many ways. And I don't want to go into that. You can check it out yourself. Look at Operation Paperclip that allowed Nazi operatives to take plum jobs within Washington establishment. It's very interesting. It's like rabbit hole after rabbit hole, but we don't need to go there. We need to understand the basics. And that the basics were that when Trump came in, there was a major change in mood where um, what was underneath the surface began to surface. So, for example, germ warfare business, bioweapons now came to the fore through the COVID events. Even in other aspects, that authoritarianism came in. Doctors weren't allowed to criticize the official story about COVID. It was very difficult. They could lose their jobs. They could lose their license. I know this because one of my best friends is a physician. Uh, you know, you had to go along with the program, and so now these kinds of things existed before that. But what was unique about this is it was plain. It was like obvious. It was heavy-handed. So what changed was the heavy-handedness of the authorities at every level, at the level of government, federal government, at level of corporations, whatever it was, all these heavy-handed things, in Hollywood, all the Hollywood scandals, the Epstein files coming forth, all these things that had existed for decades, really, gradually came to the surface because of the internet, came to be viewed by a lot of people. Now, most people believe whatever the authorities say, right? Pretty much normally. And that's appropriate. You need to have stability in society. You can't have just anything goes because then everybody would be robbing each other in the streets or what, who knows what would happen. So you have to have a set of customs or at least a set of laws that would keep society stable. So there are things you do and you should do, and there are things you shouldn't do. These kind of things have existed, and usually it's not questioned a lot. Now, certainly since maybe the 60s, when there was a dramatic change, then also where all the conventional ideas were challenged about everything, about family, sex, everything. The Vietnam War was in the middle. We could see that was fraud. And so we moved on. And then there was a reaction to that. So people tried to find another kind of normal way of life and try to sort of fit into a traditional American culture, which would be, a separate home with a little yard and kids and, having a job and all these kind of the way of life didn't change between 1960 and 1980. A lot of other things changed. The economics of the country changed a lot. The United States was no longer the totally dominant economy. People began to lose value. Their wages, their salaries began to lose value vis-a-vis the rest of the world and vis-a-vis the upper classes. So the upper classes started having enormous power, enormous amounts of money was generated their way because of the way the economic structure was structured. And so they structured it so that there are winners, which were the few who, the 1%, as it was called, and then the rest of us. The rest of us, kind of hang in there somehow, partly through automation, through computers, making everything a little bit more efficient. And so we got the rest of society could still continue to flourish, but this gradual decline in the average income, the gradual increase in the income of the top 10 to 1%, mainly 1% or half of one, or 1/10 of 1%. So it changed the society internally, the balance of power changed. And so things became more crass. It uh, people would pursue their own interest, and there wasn't this sense of morality. And one of the tests, aside from the COVID craziness, was in the more recent events starting in 2022, I think, or no, whenever it was, October 7th was, I can't remember the years now, I'm confused with it. But the genocide that was started to occur in the Gaza Strip, what was most interesting to me was the lack of moral outrage in the empire, meaning the United States, Europe, and so on. They were people that were, of course, upset. They talked about it, but it was the internet providers, the excuse me, social media providers began to downplay this and ban posts and talks about it, particularly, and they were doing this blatantly. They were stopping talks about the genocide. Just as they stopped discussion on COVID and the all the things associated with that. So authority came down. Their hand that was hidden is now ready to. They pounced on people. So in Europe, in particular, there was a repression of dissent, much more dramatic than here in the United States, because of inertia, because we still have constitutional guarantees of free speech. Now, the social media people aren't they're not the government, so they can restrict all the speech they want. And I think everybody understands that. Everybody is beginning, or at least beginning to understand, that there isn't a free flow of information in social media. For example, TikTok, which was very popular social media, particularly among the young, was sold, forced, there was a forced sale of it in order to allow uh, the Zionist, pro-Israel oligarch to take over, or a series of them to take over the company and basically ban or limit criticism of Israel. So freedom became obviously inhibited, and the tendency of bureaucrats, the tendency of big corporations, and so on, they had a tendency to support the abridgment of real free speech in the society. It still exists in America. I can talk to my friends and anybody I want about all my different weird ideas, and I'm not going to be arrested. But on social media, I might be blocked, and I have been. Uh, so not by the government, but by whoever had the control of the website or the social media platform. So this inhibition of freedom is very dramatic, particularly in the United States, because we have a tradition. We're based on the 18th century Enlightenment, which one of the things that it posited was the free exchange of ideas. Certainly scientific, and that those free exchange of ideas, even scientifically, are not as are lowering. They're not as much as they used to be. Science is much more restricted, and COVID outlined that. So you could not talk, no matter what kind of researcher you are, no matter what your status is, if you went against the establishment in that, you would lose your job or suffer in your career in some way. Just like if a journalist for the New York Times or Washington Post or something like that had a critique of Israel and Israeli politics, they would they first of all, it wouldn't be published. The editor would ban it, and then the person, or the male or female, whoever he or she was, would they would be fired or their career would be ruined. And this didn't start, of course, with Trump. It started before that during the Iraq War buildup when major people were banned from the media. The most popular talk show, Phil Donahue, was jettisoned from the mainstream media. Various critics like Chris Hedges were fired or were forced resignations in the New York Times. So everybody could see, and these people knew what they were talking about. And I'm not going to go into all the people who lost their careers due to their objection to the Iraq War. It happened a little bit in Vietnam as well, but not as much. It wasn't as dramatic. But the point is that people are reacting uh, to these events and they're wanting to open up to new things. So, as I'm saying, I am talking politically here, but I think that that's less important than the psychic effects on human beings. First of all, it's the government and the establishment is trying to encourage fear of disease, fear of the enemy, fear of change, whatever you want to call it, on all sides. I mean, there's people on politically who are trying to revive the traditional family, so traditional role models, so that when instead of having women work, they should stay home and take care of the kids, and that's a movement. It makes sense. It's a legitimate movement. There's others who are trying to make sexuality fluid, so that if I feel like being a woman today, although I wouldn't be very convincing, I could do that. I could say I'm trans, and I could, do whatever, be a woman. So that's the policy. So the policies are very different. There's such division within us because there's confusion. And as I've been talking about in my earlier videos about what's good and what's bad, how do you determine what's good and what's bad? In this atmosphere of repression, on the one side of government and major financial and corporate organizations. Okay, so that's one thing. And the other thing is that we want to know more. I want to find, lots of people now want to find out, well, what happened in the Iran war? What happened in what's happening in the Ukraine war? What's going on in economically? What's going on politically in these different countries and these different crises? People aren't accepting necessarily. I mean, most people do accept whatever the media tells them, but increasing numbers of people don't really believe that anymore. They go to alternative media and even those alternative media, they have very different points of view. And there's just so many points of view. How can you judge what's right, what's wrong? Now, my basis of judgment is, of course, what works for the soul. What is it? What kind of situation and societal mores encourage the ability of the soul to live its true life. You as an individual, does this society allow you to fully be who you really are? And who you really are, I generally define as the most authentic you. That's not subject to either parental, societal restrictions, but that's you that exists pure in the pure sense of your being. And I always, and again, I'm repeating myself, is that being that is that consciousness that is you is that which witnesses joy. So when I feel joy, that being, that consciousness is who I really am. It's a very important and almost, very dramatic idea that we actually can experience ourselves when we experience joy. And joy and love and beauty and all these other things are totally natural for human beings. So, what is it that keeps us from that? So, and I've said before, I said fear and uh, I would call it vice, but I'm very clearly want to define vice. Vice is whatever it is that keeps you from being who you are. So if I don't want to be who I am, I'll use a drug to escape from that self. I don't like that. I don't want to experience anything. I just want to be left alone and I want to be covered and happy and feeling good, but not joy. So you can experience joy with drugs, but it's strictly a physical sensation without the soul being out there and really existing. It might just come out for a moment, but then becomes obscured by the drug or the escape, the habits, the addiction to food, addiction to sugar, addiction to gambling, addiction to sex that sort of feeds on itself. And as I discussed before, these addictions and these tendencies to lower your sense of who you really are also involve the spiritual dimension, which are spirits that will prey on that because the spirits are fed by these kinds of spirits are fed by negativity. So if you're angry, they will eat and they will encourage you to be more angry or to whatever it is that will diminish your ability to be who you really are. That's the whole game. It's very simple. So when you look at external events happening like that are so confusing and so crazy, uh, that we're just confused and stunned. I was somewhat stunned by, for example, Trump's announcement that he was going to just wipe out the entire civilization in Iran, the forever. Well, that implies that he's going to use nuclear weapons. So I was prepared for that. I was thinking, well, maybe that's going to happen. Maybe they're going to they're going to throw some ICBMs at him and blow them away. I mean, we have the weapons to wipe the entire country out. Of course, countries around them are going to suffer as well, and the atmosphere will, all these things. But the fact that that threat came right out of the underground, out of the unconscious, means that all these things are in play now. These are there's no longer anywhere to hide. There's no longer any ability to deny the craziness of this time. We can't go back to business as usual. We can't go back to normal. Not only that, but we can't, quote, elect anybody because we elected Trump because he said we won't have foreign wars. And what he does, all the things he said, he does the almost the exact opposite. But this happens from every president, every politician. They'll say whatever it is to get elected, and then they'll do whatever they want, whatever the money tells them to do. Now, it may be that he was never serious about nuclear war, or it may be that he was, I don't know. But whatever it is, who he's being ruled by are the people with the money. So I'm suspect that the people with the money said, okay, okay, well, whatever it is, let's not do nuclear war because, we're not going to make profits with that. We'll make profits on you announcing that you're going to go to nuclear war, then we'll short sell stocks. And then when you say, well, you're not going to do that, then we'll, buy stocks. There's the levels of corruption that are involved here are incredible. And it's not just the country's government or the ruling class. This is what I want to try to emphasize. I'm not a Marxist. The ruling class is a reflection of our culture. They don't, we think they act in their own interests, but because they tend to be rather unconscious as human beings. And again, I've met some of these types of people. Not that I am an expert at them, but here and there I've run into these types of people, and particularly working and living in Washington, D.C. I saw a lot of depends on what level. More of the people at the mid level or bottom level, not the higher ups, but I have had a glimpse of that too as well. And these are just human beings that are just not as smart as they think they are. They're just kind of like react, but they're very clever. Like Trump. Trump is very clever. He knows how to manipulate things. He's really good at it. But he's also a little nuts, as many people are. That's the other thing. There's because of our environment, which has both politically it might be repressed, but the culture is actually opened up, so that all these things, as I said, the traditional types, the evangelical Christians, and then there's the sort of wild Hollywood types with drugs and the Epstein class. And everything in between. I mean, there are all these subcultures that are totally emerging as being um, uh, that can continue just the way they are. And you've got so many different points of view available to us, so many different religions we can look at, and we can look, oh, well, is this right? How can we evaluate this? So our job now is to have a foundation upon which to judge. I mean, you have to make evaluation. I hate the term to use judge because it implies a moral thing. It's not a moral thing. It's just what's what's helping my soul develop, what's not helping my soul develop. That's what we have to do. So if I have a thought that, well, I messed up my life and I'll never do anything right, or all these kind of operettas that go on in people's minds that have gone on in my mind, that's not going to help my soul to develop. So I have to establish habits that help me moderate my craziness. And to be blunt, we're all kind of crazy now. We don't have a basis for anything. We don't have a thing that says, oh, this is the Bible says this, and so we shouldn't do that. Well, first of all, the Bible says a lot of things, and they don't make any sense if you put them all together. They're totally contradictory. And I'm not going to get into biblical criticism, and maybe at some point I will. But it's you cannot find wisdom in the Bible. You can find wisdom in the Bible for sure, but not everything is wisdom. There's all kinds of crazy shit in there. And as we're finding out because of what what's caused the wars in the Middle East is very biblical because the Zionists believe that they're destined to rule the world and and certainly that area of what they think is ancient Israel, which is totally false. It's not that at all. Greater Israel. But whatever it is, that's what they think, and that's how they'll act. And so, but the point is, we have all these contrary things, these swirling things. We don't have anything with the United Nations doesn't mean anything. International law doesn't mean anything. It's totally gone. The United States has a constitution, but we don't really follow it anymore. We follow force. So money is force. Money buys influence in politics. That's I think everybody can understand. They don't need a study. There was a study about 10 years ago or something like that on the oligarchy by I think it was Yale and Northwestern. I can't remember what the was one of these big studies. Let's not argue that. We know this is true. I mean, unless you don't think that. I can't imagine that. Money buys politicians, period. More than at any time in our history. Perhaps, perhaps there were a couple, some exception, but it's really blatant and systemic now. The corruption is not really corruption. It's just the way things are done. You know, if you want to have that money, you got to take that position. Now, the money, you might call it campaign contribution, but it goes way beyond campaign contributions. Again, it's I'm not going to try to explain that, but it's reality. And yes, there are bagmen with bags of money, right, that will hand it out. Okay. That's usually not the case, but it's partly the case. Usually it's insider trading and lecture fees and all the rest of it. So let's just stop there about that. But that craziness in the culture that we see now through the internet, through even mainstream media, which is very restricted. I've never seen it this restricted in my lifetime. I mean, really, really restrict. They can't say anything. They can't criticize anything. Although I think that's going to change, and I think it's beginning to change. So that it should be interesting. Now, inside of us, we have the same thing going on. We have a crazy quilt of emotions and desires, and we want to do this, and then the next day we find no, we want to do that. Young people are particularly prey to this. They don't know what to do with their lives because they have no guidance. There's no morality. If we can kill tens of thousands of people and women and children just like that, destroy entire communities, raise them to the ground, and be perfectly fine with it, which apparently Americans are, uh, or or indiscriminate bombing, and it's just it's normal. Nobody bats an eyelash on all this anymore because they're confused. They have no idea what's going on. They have no idea the stakes involved here of these wars. They don't know the history. They don't have a clue. They don't know what Iran is or was. They don't know that it's a 5,000-year-old civilization continuously evolving and changing but they were, the same, at least ethnically, people that existed 5,000 years ago, pretty much. This is crazy. We don't know anything about Russia or Ukraine or any of the rest of it. We even the people who report on this seem totally ignorant of the most basic things about history. I'm stunned because 50 years ago, this was not the case. There was some knowledge of the countries we were working with, but really, for example, in Vietnam, uh, the people who were making decisions ignored the experts. Uh, I know quite a lot about this because my father was involved in the Vietnam War decision-making process in the State Department at that time. So he told me all about what was going in, what was happening, and why. the whys and wherefores, and his career suffered because he opposed it and all the rest of it. So I'm not going to get into that, but because I'm trying to emphasize here, ambiguity has always been there, but much more now because there's no solid moral foundation for anything. Why is this good and why is that bad? Why are we good and the Iranians bad? What on what basis? Just because we say so? There has to be a reason. Oh, they're Muslim. Oh, they're bad. Well, okay, what is it about being Muslim is bad? Have you read the Quran? Do you know anything about what they say? Really? Compared to the Bible, the Quran is almost an island of sanity compared to particularly the Old Testament. So let's think further on this. But let's understand that these external events that seem confusing and violent, and school shootings and all the rest of it, drug addiction, crime, it's not just them, it's us. It's our internal state. It reflects our internal state, our lack of real authority. How can you take seriously authorities like Donald Trump, who's obviously has a gangster attitude and obviously is unhinged, uh, at least recently, or at least he appears to be. He might be fine. He might just do that as an act. That's possible too. But whatever it is, there's not anything called dignity that exists in the empire anymore. The European leaders are all maybe not as blatantly crazy, but they're very sort of dumb, appear to be sort of stupid, dull, and they're just bureaucrats, really. And they have the bureaucratic mentality. They just check the spreadsheet, and no, 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 that's it. This is what we believe, so this is what no thought, no, no real personalities that have a deep feeling for anything other than power. So each of these characters struggle for power, and these characters represent us. So what are we doing in our lives? Are we struggling for power? Are we trying to get what we want? Are we trying to arrange our lives that are just the way we want it? We want the big house, we want the big job, we want the wife, the trophy wife, we want the husband who provides, and all these criteria that women and men have for joining together to make families, if they even make families, because you can make a family, you can be married, and then it's gone. I've had several marriages. What happened to them? I've had kids by two different marriages. What happened to them? Where was what happened? What happened to you? Well, many people have many people don't even bother getting married now, it seems. They live together for a while, they have kids, and then they don't, and then they have kids with someone else, and then they go da 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 da. There's no continuity. It's all fragmented. So we have to understand that our fragmented society is also our fragmented self, our fragmented sense of who we are. Am I a racial group? Am I a gender? Do I have a particular lifestyle? Am I this group or that group? Am I a Republican? Am I a MAGA person? Am I a political correctness person? Am I going to talk? Oh, you shouldn't talk that way. You shouldn't say that. Da 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 da. All these kind of people, the Karens, they're the sort of poster child of wokeness. You know, kind of the scolding female archetype. In real healthy societies, you have that, but it's all for a purpose that helps society. Nothing here that we see in our society is really helping because it's too fragmented. So we need to come together and understand fundamental morality, fundamental moral principles. And in my view, the only way you get that is through connecting to that higher self, that real self, we'll call it. Because the rest is just made up out of whole fragments of bullshit. Who we really are is very clear if we just shut up. What happens when you're silent? That's who you are. That's at least you're beginning to see that. That's why meditation can be very important, or anything that helps you maintain silence. And I'm not a poster child for this, by the way. I distract myself from in all kinds of ways, but I'm working on it, and I have been working on it for a long time. And it takes, as I've said in my earlier videos, it takes certain processes to begin to work on that spiritual work, spiritual process. And part of it is to not take the external events as being something out there. We're not taking God and religion as something out there. It's internal. It is these archetypes, they're almost like symbols, are real. The the God archetype, the Jesus archetype, the Buddha archetype, all these are real. They have a function, a power. They're these spiritual energies that help bring us into understanding who we are. Christ sometimes called Christ consciousness, because I'm the two. Well, the religion I came from was Christianity, obviously, because uh, I was born in 1949, and everybody got baptized. It was pretty much a Christian country. Uh, Naturally, I come from that tradition and I accept that tradition. And I think that you can operate within that tradition to bring out that true self. That's what I think Jesus's teachings basically were until they were perverted by the church and churches, including the Protestant churches that came afterwards. And it's not that they are totally perverse, there's wisdom in all of them. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is that we need to, before we start hassling about politics, I mean, we can express ourselves, we can vote, we can do this, and young people can go out in the streets if they want. I'm not going to join them. I I went to plenty of demonstrations in my life. That's not where it's at. Where it's at, I mean, it's okay. You can meet people, have fun, whatever. But what we really need to do is change the interior. When we change our interior, we begin to change the culture because, as I've said, we attract energies that are positive. That the more we do that, the more we attract these positive energies that are there to make us happy. What's wrong with that? I mean, that's pretty good. If we acknowledge our true self, I have my true self, but I'm kind of clouded up by this impulse, that vice or whatever it is, addiction. So I want to practice what used to be called virtue in the old sense of the word, which is basically what enhances me as my best self, my most authentic self. That's practicing that as virtue. So it could be helping others. Helping others always helps the true self because it eliminates the boundary between me and you. I mean, there is a boundary, and there has in the normal world there has to be a boundary because I'm my body, you're your body. But in terms of the soul level, we're very much together. We're very much linked. We don't have to create these separations that we seem to like so much. Be who we are and let the other person be who they are, because who they really are is pretty much the same as who you really are. The person that consciousness that experiences joy. Everybody has that. Now, except for the aliens among us, I don't know. I can't speak for them. I think there are probably aliens or weird spiritual, crazy, physical, but also physical creatures. There are people who are possessed um, by these spiritual energies. And it's not hard to get, if you want to get possessed, not that difficult. Just start practicing anger, jealousy, um, greediness, all the vices you can imagine. Go ahead, practice them all. They're going to come. They're going to come to you, and they're going to love it. They're going to love you. Now, the more positive, when you practice virtue, you're less likely to get a reward in the real world, but you're going to create an energy around you that's more attractive, that's more nurturing for other people just by you being here. I know that to the extent that I practice virtue, that I practice and I'm conscious of my true self, I'm actually changing the balance of spiritual power in this area, in this community, in this and around the world. That's how I intend to save the world. Not that it needs saving necessarily, it has its own energy, but to contribute to bringing consciousness up, that consciousness that we're all linked together to each other as human beings and to the world, the greenery, the animals, all that. We're all kind of connected in ways that our culture has not really worked on. And so we need to change the culture so it understands these connections. It doesn't mean my dog is different, is the same as me. He's a she's a dog. I'm a person. And so that dog is expresses their true dog nature and I express my human nature. But we're very much linked. That essence of who we are is very much the same. Of all things, we all share in divinity in some way. Now, exactly how that works and to try to understand it, don't bother with that. It's too complicated. The world is too big, it's too mysterious. All we can do is what we know here. We can't theorize about other things, about how many angels dance on the head of a pin, or who's more spiritual and who's less spiritual. Um, what movement is the best thing? What music brings us up? Is heavy metal music bad and classical music good? No, it doesn't. You can't make those kind of judgments. It's much deeper. It's much more complicated than that. It's more about what is authentic. Being authentically punk is better than being inauthentically classical, in my view. But that's my view because that's my value. My value system is based on authenticity. Uh, I may not always exhibit that. I fall down and then I get back up again. I fall down and I get back up again. But I know that. And I've lived long enough to have seen the effects, at least in my life and other people's lives, on being able to do that. Falling down, all right, get back up again. So it's the get back up again that really helps. So imagine that the external world is a kind of alchemical theater, that these forces represented by Trump, by Putin, by whoever's in charge in Iran, or Xi in China, or whoever is in a leadership position. They represent forces within us. There is a Trump part of me. There is I there is an asshole part of me. Yes, I do exist. That asshole exists. There's a wiser person as well. So we have to see these at play. And when we see the dynamics between these different forces, we can see that we can't demonize Trump, we can't demonize Putin, we can't demonize all these characters because somewhere deep inside of them is the same authenticity we all share. And the best thing we can do is to say, I hope that authenticity, I pray that the authenticity can emerge from this character full of vice, full of nonsense. What else can I do? That's all you have to do, in fact. You don't have to make a big deal. You don't have to give all your money away to politicians. In fact, the politicians lie all the time at any level, whether it's corporate or government. Their job is to lie, is to bullshit. It's just the way it is. It's not, it's like swimmers swim, politicians lie. Well, all you can do is pressure them to go in one direction or another direction. Sometimes they don't. They do exist. That honorable people do exist in politics, and I believe there are several of these people in our world today. And I'm not going to go into that, and I may next time. So, what I just want to bring this to you, start looking at the world as a theater. Don't take it too seriously. Your focus is on your consciousness. Don't try to change other people's ideas. You can talk, you can have dialogue with them. You can be authentically who you are. Be compassionate to everybody because whatever assholery is going on with that other person, you've got it just as well. We're all idiots here together, and we need to understand that we're not superior to each other. Just because I've done a lot of spiritual work doesn't mean I haven't fallen on my face and I'm not, that asshole part of me has totally departed. I just don't pursue it anymore. I don't try to be an asshole, which I think I have in the past. All right, so that's it. So until next time, be happy.